Hey guys, it's Bales. I'm at DraftKings and going to review some lineups, including mine from the DraftKings Fantasy Football Championship that was out in New York this past week. 180 people, $10 million, $2 million to first, and I finished 97th, so right in the middle of the pack. Not too good. Have a couple things that I guess I regret, but I put a lot of time into the lineup, obviously, and thought it was my best chance at the time. So I'll break down that one, and then the winner, Scott 4, who had 199. He won $2 million, obviously. Tinky Tyler and CSU Ram 88. Obviously, you guys probably know CSU Peter, but I got lucky and swapped with both of those guys, so check out their lineups as well. Tyler won 350,000. Peter won 100K. Both could have had potentially a lot more if things had gone a little bit differently. But yeah, and I had got 97th for 25,000. So I went with a triple stack of Rivers, Melvin Gordon, and Tyrell Williams. I was not 100% on having Gordon in there, and then it skewed toward Gordon, I guess, in the... I think it was on Friday or Saturday when Kuechly was ruled out. So the Panthers had Luke Kuechly out and Charles Johnson, and I mistakenly thought that the Chargers were going to put up a bunch of points. Obviously, Melvin got injured almost immediately, carted off with a hip injury, so that was not that fun of an experience. In hindsight, it really probably didn't matter that much, because even if Melvin has a decent game and I score, say, 154 points or something, there's people ahead of me that still would have had him. That would have only been good for 60th. It would have paid out 30K, so that's a 5K difference, and that's not even looking at the other lineups ahead of me. So really turned out to actually not be a very big deal. But I was set on it also. I pretty much the only other option there for me was DeMarco Murray. And I like DeMarco, and thought that in lower stakes, Melvin would be higher than DeMarco. I thought DeMarco would be quite low facing the Broncos, but the Broncos' run defense is quietly, or not that quietly in this tournament, quite poor, one of the worst in the league. And so I really did like DeMarco, but my bold prediction that I had was that I think I said it on the Barstool podcast last week, that DeMarco would be over 20% in this, and he was 23.3. So he's the same as Gordon, same number of people used him. So once I saw that, I was fine with the correlation, and there's a slight correlation around 0.1 between Melvin and Phillip Rivers, and I thought that in this particular game it would be a bit higher. And Phillip Rivers and Tyrell over the past year have an R value, strength of correlation, of 0.61, which is high for any two players, even a quarterback and receiver. So even though that's really what killed my lineup, I had a couple other good things going on here. That trio, without it, I actually am probably doing pretty well here. But I can't really fault myself too much. It wasn't too much of a question for me that I was going to be going with Rivers, Gordon, and Tyrell, and then playing Olsen in the same lineup for the game stack. Thought Olsen would be lower than 16.1, so he did okay, but yeah, that was a game stack there. Jeremy Hill at running back, I thought he'd be a lot higher than 12.8, so I was super happy with that, and he of course did very well against the Browns. I thought that a lot of people would actually be using him, trying to force in one of Le'Veon or David Johnson, it was very tough to do, but still a lot of people did it just because they're so pretty much automatic. David Johnson hurt lineups. Le'Veon, you couldn't win, or it was very, very difficult to win without him in this. So T.Y. Hilton I knew was going to be chalk. I was okay with it given that he was at home. I think it might have been Friedman posted some pretty good stats in his wide receiver breakdown on Hilton when the Colts are favored, Hilton at home. And I knew that was going to be high. I was okay with it given that I thought Tyrell wouldn't be super owned and that Marquise Lee would be low. And I talked a lot about these trends that I've created that I have in the My Trends section at FantasyLabs that look at ownership. So they try to predict ownership and value. And I spent a lot of time on that in the preseason, and I've been, tinkering it throughout the year. And that's really what I've used quite a bit. It's a huge factor in addition to my model in my tournament lineups. And the top one at receiver, the one with the most trends that I thought was a combination of value and ownership, was Lee at receiver, and the most at running back was Gurley, who I used in the flex. And he had 17 points, so at his price it was very good, and it was one of his best games of the year. He was fairly owned in this, 22.8%. And the trends that I create aren't solely looking for low ownership. Sometimes a guy can be at 20%, and that's really good, and he should be higher. That's what I thought was the case with Ty, who had a big game. Gurley, I'm not so sure because I don't know if the upside was there. I didn't think he would be quite this high, so I thought he would be closer to in between 10 and 15, even in something like this. But yeah, that was pretty much my thinking there. And then Steelers D, I got on at the last minute, like literally 10 minutes. It's not like I created the lineup in the final 10 minutes, but I had a bunch created, and Steelers D not in that many. And then I was just chatting with Levitan and just saying, talking to him about defenses, because I was looking at the Redskins, the Seahawks, and I just couldn't really pull the trigger on those. The defense that I had rated the highest and projected for the most sacks by far was the Vikings, but they were so expensive. I think at least they were 39, so the 1,100 more than the Steelers, and I couldn't do it. And I was also playing Lee, and there actually was a thought on my part to play both the Vikings and Lee, and if I had to do that, I probably would have, but I think I probably look like a fish in doing that, and that doesn't concern me too much. If I thought it was the best lineup, I would still do it, but I didn't think that the value was just like so great that I had to play a defense against a receiver, and almost never do that, so it would have been unusual. But so that was the lineup. I thought I don't have regrets. Like I said, there were some other players I was considering. I wasn't really set. It was a unique week in that I wasn't set on anyone until the end, and even then could have gone a lot of different ways. I had a lot of Le'Veon lineups. I had almost no David Johnson lineups, but I had a lot of Le'Veon lineups. The one player I thought I was going to be on in the beginning of the week was Sammy Watkins, but I thought that he was actually probably gone. There were so many players, like he's very similar to DeMarco in that if this were a league with a $20 buy-in or something, I would have 100% played those guys, and I thought that they would be much, much higher in these. So, and I believe that was the case. So, next we'll check out Peter's lineup in 10th. I'll go through these a bit quicker. He scored 179.86. He did have Cooks. We were watching a bit at the end. You'd be surprised maybe at the championships. Some guys are really into it, and then a lot are just like hanging out, drinking, eating, whatever. So we really didn't know too much what was going on. We did see Brandon Cooks score, and then it got called back. So if Cooks had scored, Peter would have finished fourth, I think. So it cost him $400K. And then indirectly cost me money too. You can always look back on that stuff though, and find something. But that was a late touchdown that we didn't even know got called back. So Peter went with you probably noticed my lineup was chalkier than normal, which I knew was going to be the case. I just thought that was right. Peter's has more low-owned guys, including Lamar Miller, who was my second highest rated in terms of those trends. So there was some consideration from me to be using Lamar Miller and Gurley as my top two backs, and it was probably right, and just was too scared. Carlos Hyde was also near there, and was he for me? It would have been Miller and Gurley ahead of Hyde. I don't think there was no serious consideration to play Hyde for me, but he had a really big game, obviously, and that was a great call from Peter, and also Tinky Tyler played him too. So the fact that both of those guys who are sharp were on him was interesting. Kirk to Deshaun had the big touchdown. Deshaun, I think it was 80 yards, so he only had 22 yards otherwise. But that's sort of what you get with Deshaun. And other than that, they really didn't have a good game, but it did end up working out for Peter there. Brandon Cooks was someone that so everyone else in this lineup I considered playing. They were fairly close options for me. Peter and I obviously don't talk about our lineups going into this, so I would have no idea who he's playing. We could have a ton of overlap, and we easily could have here with me potentially playing Miller. Kirk was a consideration, although I would have put him with Pierre Garcon. Emmanuel, and I thought I would have played Emmanuel at 13.9. I thought he was going to be about 25, honestly. I thought he was going to be in the T.Y. Hilton range. Ertz I was on at the last minute, and so one of the decisions I made was between Ertz and I forget what defense, and the Steelers and Olsen, and I went with the Steelers after talking to Levitan and just him talking about how aggressive they've been lately, and also Olsen for the potential correlation with the game stack in a game that I thought would shoot out in Carolina that didn't, obviously. Peter went with Mike Evans in the flex. Mike Evans at 27%. I think he was just thinking here. I don't think he could have gone Le'Veon. He could have if he maybe dropped the defense or something, and I think he was considering it, but I thought that Mike Evans would actually end up lower than this in the beginning of the week. I thought that Mike Evans would be just super chalk. Everyone would try to get Mike Evans, but then when you started to create lineups, you realize that if you wanted Le'Veon and then tried to put Mike Evans in, you're going like almost min-priced everywhere else, or you're playing just some really risky, potentially bad plays just to get those guys in. And I knew everyone would try to get Le'Veon or David Johnson and just force them into lineups. And so I thought Mike Evans would be a bit lower, but there were more lineups without one of the running backs, I guess, than even what I thought, even though they were high owned. Congratulations to Peter on 10th. Tinky Tyler, I met him in the Bahamas a week before this, and we played craps, hung out a bunch with Jay Rayner, Beep on a Jeep, and that was a good time. He's super sharp guy, and we ended up hanging out a bunch, and he went with Rodgers to Jordy, and that's an interesting one for me because it was my my number 2 stack against the Seahawks, and it was I talked about Rodgers in the beginning of the week a bit. Wasn't trying to give too much away, but I thought that he was an underrated play against the Seahawks, and I thought some people would be on him here. Obviously, in hindsight, I wish I had done that one, but getting in Rodgers, Jordy, and Le'Veon and DeMarco is very tough. So Tyler went very cheap elsewhere here, obviously, but Rodgers and Jordy were the cheapest that they've been all year, both of them, and they were playing at home against a Seahawks defense that is obviously good, but not as probably much of a hindrance to quarterbacks as you might think. And because they were so cheap, he was able to get those top running backs in. And you probably noticed Peter didn't have Le'Veon. That was surprising to me, but the fact that he finished 10th without Le'Veon was really good. I think he was the highest lineup without Le'Veon, and so he pretty much almost hit everything else. Cooks and Evans could have scored a bit more, but that was a really, really high score to have without Le'Veon. But then you can see Tyler was forced to use obviously like Kearse and Meredith, and Meredith did very well. Jermaine Kearse not at only 1.7. I talked to Tyler after. I think Kearse was, I don't know if he regrets playing him per se. He knew that was like sort of what he had to do to get those other guys in, but that was the one guy that he was definitely unsure on. But that was a game stack also getting the Seahawks receiver in there, so he was probably thinking the Seahawks were going to have to throw a bunch if he really did like the Packers, and that was the case. So I don't know, that was a bad call at all. He also went with Olsen, Hyde, like I talked about, and Vikings D. And Vikings D really didn't do that well in terms of points, but it was very similar to the Steelers, who I chose. The Steelers had 5 sacks. Playing Tyrod, who doesn't throw that many picks, so that's one of the he'll just take the sack, which is one of the downsides where I thought that, maybe not as high of a touchdown probability as you'd like, even though they had a ton of sack potential. The Vikings were the opposite, playing Blake Bortles, and they did get the sacks. So this was, they gave up only 16 points. I think this was like a bottom range of outcomes for how well the Vikings played. To get the 4 sacks, they had a block, to have only 7 points. Probably like half the time they pick off Bortles for a touchdown or something. So this is a really good lineup. $350K to Tyler. And then first was Escott, who had a negative player in his lineup and still was able to win. Travis Benjamin, negative 0.2, just negative 2 rushing yards. So to be able to win with that was incredible. He actually was up a bunch. I think he had 206 points at the end, but he had the Falcons D, and they had a shutout. So if the Rams scored, he was going to lose points, and he did. So he ended up winning by less than 2 points, which would be a $1 million swing, 2 million to 1 million for second. And he went with a double stack like I did, no running back, but Andrew Luck, T.Y. Hilton, and Jack Doyle. Only player with Jack Doyle, who had a pretty good game and certainly good enough for the cost. Le'Veon, of course. Shady McCoy. I wasn't going to be on Shady McCoy because I like DeMarco better, Jeremy Hill, those other cheap running backs that I talked about, and then Le'Veon. So those were really my only considerations, and I didn't think LaShawn was bad per se. And he at 82, I think he was 8,200. He was significantly more than DeMarco, who I believe was 7K, and Gordon I think was 73 or 74. So he was a lot more, and that was going to drive down his ownership, and probably he was in a lot better spot as well, and could have had a potentially even bigger game here. But he did well in that, I'm sure that Scott was happy to get Shady at only 6.7. Taylor Gabriel, super chalk, did well, had the long touchdown, so that worked out. I had him in other tournament lineups, but I wasn't going to play him in this one. Ty, who I talked about, and then Falcons D I looked at quite a bit. Obviously, wish I had gone that direction, especially with only 4.4% of the field doing it. But the only one that I didn't consider, probably of all these lineups, was Tevin Coleman, and 8.9% of the field being on was surprising to me too. So probably something for me to go back and look, and why did I not even consider him? He had 2 touchdowns, 1 receiving, and 1 rushing, but for 8.9% to be on and then him to have a good game, obviously there's something there that other sharp people liked that I didn't like. So that would be in reviewing a lineup, something that I would go ahead and look at, like why was my model not pointing to Coleman at all, and why were the trends that I created not pinpointing him. And then I might conclude, okay, well, this is sort of the way that I do this, and I still think that I'm right, or I missed this and I probably need to tweak things to make sure that I'm not missing on this particular type of player, this particular type of running back who might be a good value. And one other, I mentioned this in past videos, but one other good practice, I think, is to go back and look at ownership in something like this, or in the 1K or the 300, and compare it to your lineups and compare it to cheaper stakes. And generally, you should have players who are higher owned at higher stakes. So if your players that you're using in your lineups in any buy-in are higher in a 300 than they are in a $3, then you're probably on the right path. And if they're consistently lower owned, that should, not that everyone's sharp in even this or in a 300 or a 1K, but obviously there's a correlation between buy-in and the competition. So if the guys are consistently lower at higher stakes, then that's probably not that great of a sign. You don't want to get caught into thinking like everyone else, but consistently you should probably be on those same types of players. So yeah, overall it was a good event, and I had a lot of fun. It was a good overall outcome for me in terms of my return after the swaps and things. My lineup didn't do well, but always happy to take some of the money that other people won. That's always good. So yeah, I would say it was like a top 10 or top 15% outcome for me in terms of ultimately what I'll get relative to the equity of the seat and everything. So yeah, I'm overall happy with it. And even though it didn't work out with my lineup, I did think that I rolled out what was my best effort. So yeah, happy overall.